Hi, this is Kelsey Fogassi for AP Gov 5-Minute Review, and in this segment we're going to be discussing interest groups. So it's important to note, and I've always seen this on the AP Gov exam in some form, whether it's on an FRQ or a multiple choice question, it's important to distinguish an interest group from a political party. When we talk about an interest group, we're talking about a specific area within policy. So if you take, for example, the NEA, the National Education Association, their policy is focused on simply education. They don't care about gun rights. They don't care about really other social issues. They're hyper focused on education because they are at the end of the day an interest group. Note that it says interest, not interests. Interests. So whereas interest groups are policy specialists, we see that political parties are policy specialists in the sense that they have a broad range of policies. So, for example, a political party is going to take a stance on taxation. It's going to take a stance on social issues. It's going to take a stance on the size of government. These are things that political parties tend to do. Now, when we look at different types of interest groups, there are economic, dealing with labor unions, environmental, dealing with the Sierra Club, equality, for example, the National Organization of Women or the ACLU, and then you also have consumer and public interest lobbies such as the Children's Defense Club. So they typically fall into one of these four categories. Now, they do play major roles and functions. Of course, they are going to be supplying credible information for the most part to congressmen and congresswomen. They also supply voters with information, especially if it's going to be through the newspaper or if it's going to be through an advertisement of some sort. They can also raise public support in these fashions as well. Equally as important, interest groups do create political action committees and provide a high number of campaign contributions. That is certainly important in terms of getting your issue to be a top priority for a politician. They also do employ former government officials, whether it's in the bureaucracy or former congressperson. They will also seize opportunities to protest and disrupt, especially when they see it to be a very critical issue. And ultimately, they can lead litigation that can be in the form of Supreme Court cases. They could also lead litigation in terms of class action lawsuits on behalf of the people who belong to their interest groups. They also sometimes will try to influence the court if there's a particular Supreme Court case that they believe that they have a unique viewpoint on that they can help the justices, and as such they will file what's called an amicus curiae brief, which translates to a friend of the court. But probably what's most important here about interest groups is that they form part of the Iron Triangle. And when you get to the bureaucracy as well as the Congress chapters, this will sort of all fit in and make a little bit more sense. So basically, it's called an Iron Triangle because it's very difficult to penetrate through this Iron Triangle, that these interest groups, such as the example that you see here, have such a tight grip on the bureaucracy and the congressional subcommittees that they all sort of help each other. As you see here, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. So for example, the interest group is providing the congressional subcommittees with campaign contributions. They also provide information, as we said earlier, about the industry. In return, you're going to see legislation affecting tobacco farmers and other members of the industry, typically in a very positive manner. Hence, cigarette smoking is not illegal. With respect to the bureaucracy, they will once again provide information to the industry. They will also support the agency's budget request when it requests it by Congress, which of course controls the power of the purse. In return, they will get rulings on tobacco production and prices, which can be beneficial. So you see that it's a very tight triangle here, and that the interest groups can have a very strong control over the congressional subcommittee and the bureaucracy. It can be very difficult to change policy if you're outside of there. So certainly with money in interest groups, 527 organizations or interest groups typically can use, aside from PACs, they try to influence elections through issue ads that do not directly endorse or oppose a candidate. They just might say where that candidate stands on that particular issue and might lead a viewer to some conclusion as to support or not support the candidate. Of course, also political action committees can be used to donate money to candidates, and that is certainly used. And then, of course, you have lobbyists who are part of interest groups who provide information, help politicians plan strategies for legislation that they see as beneficial. Also, if it's a politician who has supported that interest groups, they can certainly help them with their re-election campaigns. And of course, lobbyists are a support of, or source rather, of ideas and innovations. And at the end of the day, interest groups, which do heavily hire lobbyists, there is very mixed evidence as to whether or not lobbying works. And then lastly, the last resort to influence policy by the interest groups, litigation, amicus curiae briefs, friend of the courts, as we talked about, and class action lawsuits. These are the last resorts to influence policy when Congress or lobbyists do not work.